Humans are always finding a way to discover or create perfect art without flaws, because that's what our eyes apparently need. So what about the style, the substance, or the warm memories of art from an older generation? When it comes to video games, graphics seem to be one of the most important things on someone's mind. How close can these experiences I'm playing replicate reality? Why do they not replicate reality? Why does something so recent look so unappealing visually compared to a title from many years before? But many of these questions tend to lead to disappointment. If we, as players, are forced to look back instead of forward at graphics of the past, we might uncover a charm in many of these titles unlike anything today. When it comes to visuals in a game, the art style seems to be constantly undermined in importance. However, understanding an artist's or developer's intention behind stylized visuals can help us realize that realism isn't always the be-all and end-all. The advancement of art and technology has seemingly always been linked to realism, and it can be hard as consumers to break out of that mindset. Never judge a book by its cover, they say, but this mindset is psychologically ingrained in us as human beings and consumers of art and technology. But to truly appreciate the process behind many video game visuals, we must try our best to persevere past initial impressions of realism and think about what the developers and artists are actually trying to achieve. Styles in a game are indeed very purposeful and reflect the tone, atmosphere, or even characters of a world we experience. Other titles may just simply be aiming for a more abstract and meaningless approach, then attempt to captivate the player and create a memorable adventure. A title such as Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions has a very purposeful approach to its visuals, with each dimension and each Spider-Man having a different look to distinguish themselves and showcase the scope of the Spider-Verse. Something like the most recent Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, on the other hand, doesn't seem to have a style for its presentation of graphics. Many titles in the series before it bounce around different art styles, despite a lot of the same characters and world appearing in similar time periods. Tears of the Kingdom, therefore, can be seen as having its painting-like aesthetic solely to create an imaginative experience. Or maybe in an industry context, the developers wish to break out of the mainstream appeal of reaching the highest possible fidelity in modern gaming. Regardless of the intention, these more differentiating styles of video game visuals can reinforce the creativity of this medium. There are plenty of films and television shows that feature live-action appearances of real people. So why does every game need the stress of creating lifelike faces, animations, and scenery when the tools are there to flex their creativity that can be achieved in this interactive medium? A strong focus on creating a distinct visual flair for these games can even benefit these titles in the long term. Striving for the highest level of fidelity can actually lead to many games that once looked unbelievably realistic to end up being very rough on the eyes. New innovations in technology and techniques are constantly and will be constantly introduced into the market for developers to invest in creating the most lifelike experience possible. And with more improvements happening more often, the greater chances there are for once hyper-realistic visuals to become dated faster. The replication of realism can always be measured, compared, and improved upon. Therefore, realistic graphics will always get overtaken and eventually become inferior. Games that diverge their focus away from fidelity cannot be as simply compared and have a greater chance of being immortalized in the gaming landscape. A focus on art style rather than fidelity, both for players and developers alike, can invigorate a much-needed charm in many video games, especially of the past. Now we are beginning to reveal what gaming visuals of the past can truly mean for the medium. What if I told you that old graphics in old games don't always look very appealing, both in style and realism? Sometimes it's the inside that counts, not the outside. Content within a game can more often than not be indicative of the unattractive graphics, and there are many sides to this argument. One of them involves the budget of a project. As an industry, gaming used to be more of a niche compared to film, television, and other modern art forms before the 2000s. With the rise of the internet, social gaming and innovations allowed for more cinematic qualities in games. This medium soon became one of the largest moneymakers to date. Before then, however, in the generations that are now becoming retro, it was rare for developers and publishers to qualify for budgets as high as we have today. Many developers didn't even want or need this funding. Think of a title such as The Elder Scrolls IV: Oblivion. Back during its 2006 release, the visuals weren't considered very pretty by many, but this game was chock full of content. Dozens of hours of playtime, replayability, diversity, and extremely well-crafted content were included in this package at launch. The team at Bethesda was a small one, even for the time, and spent its resources more towards the amount of content and its quality, rather than achieving the best graphics possible. Back during this time, Bethesda was also independently owned, like many companies at the time, who were not owned by multimedia corporations with infinite security and funding. This allowed for developers of games from the past to have a greater focus on the countless aspects of game design and the creativity of art direction, rather than worrying about graphics. If you think back to one of the oldest genres of video games, the turn-based strategy, we are reminded of the amount of depth within its systems and design. Even newer titles in this genre, such as the recent Civilization games, share the philosophy of gameplay and variety of mechanics over visuals. With an isometric perspective in place, there's no need for detailed character faces, realistic animations, or cinematic perspectives, all because of the pulled-out camera view. Whether it's a title from the past or a more recent release that doesn't match up to your expectations of graphical quality, if you just give it a chance, then it might surprise you with how much content is packaged inside. Although this economic context of the gaming industry may have generally resulted in more substantial effort put into other areas of game design, this nostalgic limitation is often recreated in contemporary gaming. Why is it that as humans we so often look into the past and remind ourselves of the good times even when there's been so much bad? This feeling within us, this nostalgia of key moments in our life that we experienced, can also bring us so much simple joy. Modern video games may be able to hold a consistent standard of hyper-realistic visuals, and they may even have the resources and freedom to have these top-tier graphics alongside a multitude of other gameplay systems. But they can often leave us wishing to go back to a more simpler, more creative time. Many creators of the past were taking risks and innovating in new and exciting ways to engage players. Do you think Super Mario was created because plumbers and mushrooms were popular among gamers? Was bouncing a ball between players in Pong really a trend in the industry? These ideas and video games came from nowhere, simply a spark of imagination and ambition from its creators, who inspired a wave of creatives across the world to birth a new entertainment and art medium for generations to come. Now, you might be wondering where the graphics of a game ties into this. Well, it doesn't. The look of a game can spark this sense of wonder into players that goes far beyond realism or even the quality of its content. FPS boosts, remasters, and remakes can allow us to experience key moments, maybe from our childhood, or the first game we bought with money from a first job, the games that helped us get through a lockdown. Re-releases and reimaginings aim to capture this spirit of the older titles with the benefits of modern gaming, such as high frame rates or more reactive lighting and shadows. Video games today, with their popularity and their generally higher budgets, can help evolve and improve our experiences. The release of a remaster, the itch to go back and play an older title in its original state, or even watching online content of these games of the past, can help remind us of the experiences in our lives that we never appreciated as much as we should have. The graphics are there to serve as a first impression or an initial instinctive reaction to a beautiful time in our past, or the inventiveness of those who created these games. Although many of us become naturally excited by a new piece of media, that doesn't mean that the old must be forgotten about in time. Video games have been pieces of history. They are pieces of history, and they always will be. Although a book is said not to be judged by its cover, it always will be, and we can use that outward appearance as a reminder of all the positives within a piece of content, rather than its aging qualities. To conclude this discussion of video games and their relationship with graphics, we can now clearly see that the aesthetics of art styles, the focus on quality content, and the meaning imbued within many games of the past can come together to remind us of a charm associated with these older graphics. There is no denying the amount of talent and effort put into this work behind modern gaming that still does and always will exist. But perhaps ourselves as players need reminders of this sometimes. Reminders that no matter how large or how small the development team, no matter the limitations or grandeur of the budget, video games will always have the opportunity to charm us, both through the ingenuity of the developer and the belief of the player.